All right, let's have a look at some fantasy waiver wire work. Talk about people that you got to take off your roster and guys that were making an impact and that could have made an impact but are no longer going to be around at least for a couple games or the rest of the season. Rashard Mendenhall, the running back for Pittsburgh, who was in there for Willie Parker and who's got some game, messed up shoulder, will be out for the season. So if he's on your roster, you got to put him aside. He's not coming back, which means that as an add who came in for Rashard Mendenhall because Willie Parker was also out is Mewelde Moore. Here's where Mewelde gives you some things. He can run the ball. He's not as powerful as the other guys, but he catches it out of the backfield. May get you some points there. And right now, depending on Willie Parker's status and with the status and the offensive line, who's banged up and has not played great the last couple weeks, even though they came up big in the end, did Ben Roethlisberger and their football team, I think you've got to add Mewelde Moore at least to your roster, the running back for Pittsburgh. No Rashard Mendenhall and a banged-up Willie Parker. I think Mewelde Moore is a good get. Now, McGahee, another one for Baltimore. He's been up and down, the knee and then the eye. Every time you turn around, and we know how tough Willis McGahee is. But again, was banged up with a shot to the body and missed, for the most part, the second half in a game against the Steelers Monday night. So McGahee, you must put back on, like I said earlier, McClain. He has got to be on your team because you're really limited in what you can do now. I mean, depending on McGahee's status and in a game, if you have McGahee or if you have a running back on that team and you're not healthy, well, now you're in trouble. So with McGahee being banged up, and obviously with the situation going on in Baltimore, you need to make a change there and possibly add McClain to your roster to get you a couple short yardage touchdowns. I mentioned that earlier, and McGahee's just up and down with his body being beat up, and hopefully he'll get back, but tough guy, but not in the lineup as much as you need him. A couple adds. You probably need to add Damon Heward to your roster. Outplayed Jay Cutler, but here's the key, is they're running the ball, and they're going to have to throw it still, and they're not going to play musical quarterbacks anymore. They won a football game. Damon Heward's going to be the starter. I can guarantee you he was on nobody's fantasy football team for a long time. Put him in there because when he starts every game, he can put up some pretty decent numbers. He may be a good add for you to get. And then also, Jeremy Stevens at tight end. I didn't think that I'd say this. Tight ends tight ends are bigger now than they've ever been fantasy-wise, but I wasn't a big fan of Jeremy Stevens early in his career. I thought he dropped too many balls, but the way they're throwing it now with Brian Greasy, and they also got some run going, and Greasy doesn't push the ball down the field as good as others, and they're aging at wide receiver. You may see Stevens jump up with another 6-catch game. So Stevens may be an add, albeit a not overly safe one, but if you're going to do it, you might want to put him in there because Brian Greasy's throwing the football pretty well. And then finally, you got to put Chris Henry on your team. Cincinnati Bengals have struggled. Chris Henry is, after a 4-game suspension, is coming back. Chad Johnson has struggled. Carson Palmer, who says he's going to be back next week. That's something you got to look at. Is Ryan Fitzpatrick going to be the starter? Carson says he'll be back next week after limited practice this week to get himself ready to go. We'll see. But that offense still has not exploded. Chad Johnson or Ocho Cinco hasn't had that blowout game that we expect. And Chris Henry, aside from all the nonsense he's been through, his suspension is over. He can come back and play. This is a great talent. Now, what will that talent do, and will the suspension finally get him to wake up? If it does, they got themselves a pretty doggone good wide receiver. Those are some of the things to look in your fantasy. Right now, you're rolling into it, and if you're struggling, you know what, make a few, gamble a little bit. You're going to have to. And if you're rolling right along, discount anything I said. If you're healthy and your team's good, just let it go. But those are some people you might want to add that may be able to get you some late numbers. And don't forget the injuries that keep people on the bench. And your bye weeks now are coming up. Don't be silly enough like I have in the past to forget that your team's on a bye week and not have a player in that position. Have a great week.
So you think you can tackle a pro? There's only one way to find out. Click on fantasy at opensports.com.